18 years old, I was forced to participate in debate as a requirement of my college major. After 2 debate tournaments, I can report that I had a perfect record. Perfect. 0 and 12. And even though the experience of losing every one of my first 2 debate tournament debates was humiliating, it was also very eye-opening. I realized that my opponents weren't better or smarter than me. They were more articulate, and they were more confident. And that's when I decided that I wanted to become a great public speaker, and I wanted to help other people unlock their leadership potential by becoming great speakers too. Well, 3 years of competitive debate later, plus 2 degrees in communication, 5 years working on Capitol Hill for 2 different lawmakers in their communication shops, and almost 8 years with my business Spoken with Authority, I can now tell you that my hunch that I had when I was 18 was absolutely right. Public speaking is a foundational leadership skill. And today, what I'd like to do is I would like to talk to you about how you can use public speaking to make the transition from being a subject expert to a thought leader. A subject expert being the knowledgeable, behind-the-scene person that you go to when you have a question about what's going on in an organization now. And the thought leader is being the visionary go-to person for people from other fields when they're interested in knowing where an industry is headed. And in order to talk about the transition from subject expert to thought leader, I want to talk to you about it in terms of public speaking, but I want to acknowledge that writing is a really important part of it as well. And if Ross Guberman is here, I know he would agree with me in saying we could all improve our writing skills. But I'm going to focus on public speaking, and that's not only because of my background in public speaking, but it's also because public speaking, I think, is an Achilles heel for many subject experts who are trying to make that leap to thought leader. Because in our education and in our work lives, we have less training and less experience with public speaking than we do with writing. So for many subject experts, their writing is getting better, getting pretty good, but the thing that they need to bring up to speed in order to make the leap to thought leader is public speaking. Now, in order to talk to you about the characteristics that you need to develop in order to be a thought leader, I wanted to introduce a theme. And I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, so I have the opportunity to watch The Wizard of Oz pretty regularly. If it's been some time since you watched the movie, let me give you a quick refresher. Remember, Dorothy finds herself in the land of Oz. She wants to get back to Kansas. So Glinda, the good witch, tells her, follow the yellow brick road and ask the wizard how to get home. And she comes across 3 people on her journey. And the first person is the Scarecrow. Yeah, some of you also have kids or like to watch Wizard of Oz. Yes, the Scarecrow. And the Scarecrow wants a brain. Yeah. And the second person is the Tin Man. What did the Tin Man want? A heart. Yep. And the third person was the lion. He wanted... Great. Okay, so we all know the Wizard of Oz. Perfect. So let's talk about these 3 aspects that you need to develop to become a thought leader. The first being brain. Now, those of you in this room I know are developing mastery in your particular area. You have the education, you have the experience, you read the articles and books, and you come to conferences like this. Where I see some subject experts getting caught up is doing all of the day-to-day things that are on their plate. They have lots of demands on their time. And they end up focusing on the who, what, when, and where of the programs and initiatives that they're working on in the short term. In order to be a thought leader, it's important to ask those big picture questions, the how questions and the why questions. And if you look at the agenda for the speakers here at the PDC conference, you'll see that that holds true. I've picked just a couple examples to show that. If you look in green, these are 2 titles pulled from the agenda of speakers who are answering how questions. And in burgundy, it's a why question. So make sure you're asking those how and why questions and giving yourself time every day and every week to do that. The other thing that you have to do as someone who wants to become a thought leader is to develop unique perspectives. If you yourself have ever sat on a committee or made decisions about who gets a speaking role at a meeting or an event and who doesn't, what you might realize or you might recall is that sometimes you get lots of proposals within the same realm. Lots of people have similar type ideas. And it's the people who have a little different take on things that are most compelling to you as an event organizer because it's going to draw people to your event. to listen to that speaker. As a thought leader, you need to develop unique perspectives, sometimes even contrarian perspectives, in order to get those speaking roles and to be recognized as a thought leader. Let me talk about some people, 3 of them who are lawyers and 3 of them who are not, who have unique perspectives and are thought leaders. 1, Dr. Larry Richard. Many of you know him, and he's someone who believes that to improve the performance of attorneys and law firms, we have to understand the psychology of lawyers. Daniel Pink. He's known for his work in the realm of motivating employees. He says it's not compensation that motivates people. What it is giving them autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Susan Cain. She was an attorney on Wall Street. Now she's best known for her work with introverts. She herself is one, and she argues that schools and companies overlook their potential, and that introverts make really fantastic leaders. Gurmeet Sethi. He's in the world of personal finance. Gurmeet, unlike many personal finance gurus, says, go ahead, buy that $4 latte at Starbucks. You're not going to get wealthy by scrimping on lattes at Starbucks. The way that you get wealthy is that you make big leaps, whether that's getting a promotion or starting your own business to increase your earning potential. Alan Weiss, from the realm of consulting. Alan is contrarian in the sense that he says we shouldn't be paying consultants by the amount of time they spend on a project, but the value that they bring to it. And also Marie Kondo. Have any of you read her book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up? Yeah, I read it too, and I got rid of half of my stuff. But her argument is that the solution to clutter cannot be bought at the Container Store. You have to throw away junk that does not spark joy in your life. Now that we've talked about the brain characteristic of thought leaders, let's talk about heart. And I don't want to stand here and tell you to find your passion, because that's really overwhelming for a lot of people. It feels like there's only one passion out there in the world, just like one soulmate. But I want to encourage you to find your lane. Out of the areas that you have expertise, what's that one lane where you feel most comfortable, you're most interested, and would be excited to get on a stage and talk about? Let's discuss a few thought leaders who successfully found their lanes. When you think in the recent past of someone who is a thought leader in the realm of consumer technology, who is the first person who comes to mind? Steve Jobs, exactly. Steve Jobs. He was up there in his black mock turtleneck and had his gadgets and gizmos, and he was passionate about it. Bill Gates, he revolutionized our lives through technology, but that's not his lane as a thought leader. His lane as a thought leader is philanthropy. He's electrifying in his own nerdy, wonky way when he talks about the work he's done to improve education in the U.S., to combat global health crises, and also to develop clean energy solutions. Let me give you an example of someone who has successfully changed lanes, and that's Al Gore. Now, we all remember Al Gore as the congressman, senator, vice president, and presidential nominee. He was a know-it-all, he was arrogant, he invented the internet, he would sigh during the presidential debates with George W. Bush. In 2000, when he lost the presidential race, he went away for a while. And when he came back, he was a little paunchy, a little gray. He wore sweater vests, and he was fantastic because he had found his passion, which was climate, environment. Exactly. We all know him as a thought leader in that realm. Al Gore has spurred people to act at the personal level, and also by enacting state, local, federal, and even international policies relating to climate change. He has won a Nobel Prize, and I think that the Paris Agreement that was just signed on Earth Day this year was due in no small part to the work that Al Gore did as a thought leader over the last 15 years. Now, the thing about Al Gore and Gates and Jobs that is true is that they really, really genuinely wanted to help their audience, whether it was through their products, whether it was through their policies, whether it's through their philanthropy. And whether you love or hate Steve Jobs, you have to admit that the man was really able to know his audience to a degree that he knew things that we would want before maybe we ourselves knew that we wanted them. You have to really not only be passionate about your subject to be a thought leader, but you also have to know your audience, and you need to try and help improve their lives. Now we've talked about brain and heart. Let's talk about courage. Now, when you have an interesting perspective and you go on stage and you talk about it with passion, There are going to be people who disagree with you. There will be naysayers. And it takes a lot of courage to stand firm in the light of some of those naysayers. And you'll get it. You'll get negative comments in the evaluations of your speaking gigs. You will get those comments on blog posts that you write, on articles that you write, and on the Amazon reviews for your book. It does take thick skin, and it takes courage. Another way that you have to have courage as a thought leader is to take risks. I want to talk about two specific kinds of risks you can take as a speaker. One is by being vulnerable, and one is by being accessible. Now, in terms of vulnerability, sometimes when people are subject experts, they're so focused on this is the data, these are the facts, that they don't open up and show you who they are. But let me give you examples of several people that you may already know who have done this successfully and become thought leaders as a result. If you haven't seen their talks, I encourage you to check them out. I can't show them during my 15 minutes, but take 15 minutes yourself to review them. Brene Brown is one example. You may have watched her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability. In it, it's incredible. She is very vulnerable, very open, and she tells stories masterfully. Tony Robbins, in his seminars as well as in his speeches, he's very authentic. He knows what he wants to say, but he's in the moment when he's interacting with the audience. He talks about his personal struggles, successes, and failures. He even swears when he's on stage, and you may or may not like people who swear on the stage, but I will say that it feels very authentic to him, and I think that's who he would be if you had a conversation with him off the stage. And lastly, Amy Cuddy. She's the author of the new book, Presence, and she's also known for her TED Talk on body language. In her TED Talk, she ends up crying when she's talking about her experiences not only with brain injury after a car accident, but also feeling like an imposter when she got into a prestigious graduate program. She's very authentic and very raw, and it makes her very believable and relatable. So thought leaders are vulnerable. Malala is another example of a thought leader who is vulnerable, telling her story of an assassination attempt by the Taliban. Now let's talk about people who make their ideas accessible. Sometimes subject experts, they get so focused on these are the details, these are the facts, that they make their materials very dense. And that makes it inaccessible for people outside their field to understand, but also for those of us that are in the field, can make it really boring. Instead, thought leaders make their material concise, interesting, engaging, and package it in a unique and different way. Take, for example, the historian David Christian. He gives an 18-minute history of the world. 18 minutes. It takes a lot of courage to condense that much knowledge into 18 minutes. Another example is Simon Sinek. He unlocks the keys to effective marketing with just a flip chart, a Sharpie, and a handheld microphone. Dr. Jill, she is a brain scientist, and she talks about the most complex organ in the human body. She does it in a short amount of time, and she's even able to explain the complexity of the brain with teenagers and talks to them about how their still yet unformed brain causes them to have issues with judgment. Pretty interesting way to talk about it. And you may also be familiar with Lin-Manuel Miranda. He is the writer, and he also acts in the Broadway musical Hamilton. He takes a completely different perspective on history and how to share Alexander Hamilton's story. He sets it to hip-hop music and does it in a way that has resonated with audiences. Not only has he won 11 Tony Awards, but over 100,000 inner-city students from across the U.S. have received grants to go attend his Broadway musical in person and to learn about history in this unique and compelling way. Now we've talked about the 3 characteristics you have to develop as a thought leader. And in your handout, I've given you some questions to ask along the way: brain, heart, courage, and microphone, to help guide you on your journey. As you do go on your journey, remember this: you need to have in your brain a unique perspective, an interesting idea. You have to have in your heart the passion to share it with people and to help improve their lives. And lastly, you need to have the courage to stand firm with those ideas and to talk about your ideas in a unique, vulnerable, authentic, and remarkable way. Ladies and gentlemen, good luck on your journey from subject expert to thought leader. I hope that I can serve as a resource to you.